In this video, you're going to learn why you underperform in games. Hey there, I'm Eli Straw, mental performance coach and the founder of SuccessStartsWithin.com. There is nothing more frustrating as an athlete than training so hard, but then underperforming in games. Why does this happen? Does this happen to you, where you feel like you almost outwork everybody on your team, and yet during games, they outcompete you? You're not the best performer in games, but you're often seen as the one that has the highest skill in practice. So what's going on? What's happening? Why is there this disconnect? The reason that you are underperforming in games, for the most part, is going to be mental. But most athletes start to look immediately at their mechanics and their physical skills. Now, your physical skills and your mechanics, they may be to blame, and so that's the first place we want to look. The first reason why you may be underperforming in games are your physical skills. So what you can do is you can take some film of yourself during practice. Then you either take some video of yourself during a game, or you use some video you've had from recent games, and you start to analyze, are there any differences between your mechanics? Are there some mechanical things that you're doing during games that you're not doing during practice that are causing this underperforming during games? A very simple example would be if you're a baseball player, during practice, do you have a nice step, a nice load, but then during games you're stepping out and that's causing you to pull off the ball? Maybe if you're a tennis player, during practice you're really having good footwork, but then during games you're not focusing on your footwork and you have slow footwork. So in that example, what you could do during the games is you want to focus more on having better footwork. Another thing that can happen is if you look at your practices and you look at your games, your mechanics look similar, but you realize that there is something wrong with your mechanics. Well, that could be another reason why you're underperforming during games. And if you are doing well in practice, yet your mechanics aren't that good, the reason you might be doing well in practice is because practice isn't as fast as games. So you might get away with things in practice, but then when that game speed happens, you're underperforming. So if there are any kind of mechanical issues right now that you identify that are causing you to underperform, you really want to get to work on improving those. Now, when you improve those, you need to keep in mind that during games, you just want to be reacting. During practice is where you analyze your mechanics. So if you identify that there are mechanical issues that you want to improve, you put them into practice by creating a practice plan for yourself. And I've made a video on a practice plan that I'll link right up here. Now, you put those tools into practice and you really focus on improving those mechanics. But during games, you have to let go. During practice, that's where you're building this muscle memory, but then during games, you have to say, okay, my mechanics are as good as they're going to be. Because over-focusing on mechanics is another reason why you can underperform during games, because you're trying to do things too perfectly, which we're going to talk about here in a second. So, if you identify it's a mechanical issue, go ahead and create a practice plan for yourself to improve those mechanics. Now, the rest of these causes are going to have to do with your mental game. The first mental game block that's going to be causing you to underperform in games is sports performance anxiety. Sports performance anxiety is where you're worried too much about the future. You're worried about what's going to happen. Am I going to make this shot? Am I going to strike out? I can't miss this putt. You're having all of those kinds of worries, but the worries are about the future. When you think too much about the future, this can cause you to tense up, and this can also cause you to not be as focused as you need to be on what you're doing. Both of those are reasons why we see athletes underperform during games. Another mental block is the fear of failure. Now, the fear of failure and performance anxiety are going to be going hand in hand because they're both focused on the future. When you have the fear of failure, you're worried about making a mistake, but you are afraid of making a mistake because of the consequences that you think will happen if you make a mistake. One of the main consequences that I see in the athletes I work with that they're afraid of is getting benched. If you know that if you make mistakes, coach is going to bench you, well then mistakes become something to fear. But you can't be afraid of making mistakes during games because, number one, that causes you to play timidly. That's where you feel like you're playing with your foot on the brake. You may not fail during the game, you may not make a ton of mistakes, but you know that you're going to leave that game feeling a little frustrated in yourself because you held yourself back and you didn't play up to the level you know you're capable of. But another reason why you don't want to fear mistakes is because mistakes are where you learn. They're the things that you can take from games and performances and you can use them to improve your game moving forward. So by being afraid of making mistakes, you don't use mistakes in a good way, so you're actually holding yourself back from improving as you move forward. But when we're just talking about one individual game and you're underperforming in that game, The fear of failure may be to blame because you're playing timidly, you're holding yourself back because you're focusing so much on, I don't want to fail and I can't make a mistake. The next cause that you may be underperforming during games is perfectionism. Perfectionism is not the same as wanting to do your best. Every single athlete I work with, we talk about how good it is to want to go out there and do your best every single day. But in order for you to do your best, you have to remind yourself, what do I need to be focused on? Where do I need to be placing my attention? What do I need to be thinking about during the performance? And for the most part, it's not going to be how I need to be perfect. It's not going to be that I need to do everything perfectly and make no mistakes. It's going to be the process. But when this desire to be the best you can be slips into a need to be perfect, that's where we see perfectionism form, and that's where we typically see athletes underperforming during games. Because perfectionism, this is going to mess with you as an athlete on two different levels. Number one, during a game, it's going to cause you to be worried too much about mistakes. So it's going to drive that fear of failure, and it's going to drive some anxiety because you're thinking so much about I have to be perfect. And then also, what happens after you make a mistake? If your goal is I have to be perfect today and you make a mistake early in the game, so let's say you're a hitter and you strike out your first at bat, how are you going to react from that? Well, if you want to be perfect or you need to be perfect, you're probably going to get very upset at yourself. And then what's likely going to happen is that's going to carry into your next at bat, or if you're playing another sport, that one mistake is going to carry into the next play. And when you take one mistake into the next play, that lowers your chances of making that next play and doing that next thing well. So therefore, we see this start to snowball into one mistake turns into a bad game. And that's one of the reasons why you may be underperforming. Another way that perfectionism is going to hurt you is that if after every single game, you're looking back and you're seeing yourself as less than perfect, you weren't good enough, what's going to happen to your confidence over time? Well, over time, your confidence is going to go down. And as you're about to see in a second, self-doubt and low confidence is another main reason why you're going to underperform. The next cause is self-doubt. When you are doubting yourself and second-guessing your skills, you're not going to be performing as freely and as in the zone as you need to be. When you are second-guessing, you're typically thinking about your mechanics. But have you ever talked to somebody who says that they've performed in that flow state, or have you ever experienced that yourself? When you're in that flow state or somebody talks about it, one of the things that is kind of mentioned is, I just felt like I was one with what I was doing. I wasn't thinking. I don't even remember what happened. I have a lot of baseball players who will have really good at-bats and they say, I don't even remember what pitch I was seeing because I just felt like I was just there. I wasn't even really thinking about it. I have no memory of it. It's because they were just in what they were doing and they weren't thinking so much. The analytical brain wasn't firing on all cylinders. When you have a lot of self-doubt, you're going to be thinking so much because you're trying to control your performance. To let go, perform freely, and to just not worry about the outcome, which is what you need in order to get into that flow state, takes a lot of self-confidence. But when you doubt yourself, you're trying to force your performance. And when that happens, you're going to start underperforming more during games. So those are the main reasons why you may be underperforming during games. Now, if that's the case, what can you do about this? Well, you have two options. One is that you can start working through these causes on your own. Number two is you can work with a mental performance coach. But I encourage you to do one of those because you need to start working through these causes. Because whether it's a mechanical issue or whether it's a mental game issue, if there is something that you can identify as causing you to underperform during games, then that needs to be worked on, because if it is ignored, nothing's going to change during games. So, if you want to work on any of these mental game challenges on your own, I've put links in the description below to videos I've made on each of these causes. Now, if you're interested in one-on-one coaching, I offer mental performance coaching for athletes who are underperforming during competition. What we'll do is have a weekly coaching session, performed virtually, where we will work to identify your cause, and then I will teach you positive mental skills that you need to actually start performing better in competition. So you can take those practice skills and translate them into games. If you're interested in learning more about one-on-one mental performance coaching, go ahead and click the link that I put in the description below. Now, if there are any other causes that you feel like you've identified, or you have any questions about this video, please leave them in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. I put out new videos each day on sports psychology and mental training. Thank you for watching, and I wish you the best of success in all that you do.